This is Sugata Mitra. Welcome to the second big question of my course EDU8213 on the future of learning. Before I get to the question, let's go over what happened to question 1, which we looked at I think about 2 weeks ago. Question 1 was, what knowledge and skills should a child have acquired by the age of 12? And how do we evidence it or measure it? So to this, the way in which the physical class in Newcastle responded was that after much discussion, they actually produced a list. They produced a list which kind of combines both the knowledge and skills as well as the evidence into one single list. And that list is available on the hashtag EDU8213. I won't read the entire list because it's pretty long, but just to give you an idea: basic survival and life skills, appropriate cultural knowledge, personal and social skills, critical and creative thinking, working collaboratively, communication skills, self-assessment, testing at the beginning and testing continuously, unpredictable testing, written assessment, etc. It is a considerable amount of work actually, and it does cover a very large number of issues. So it is worthwhile going through that list. Then came the blogs that the students had posted, and out of those blogs we get a few issues out. These are as follows. There are 6 of them, 6 main ones. Something not right about the current system. Learning is more than teaching to the test. Increasing need for critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Concerns about over-reliance on technology. Still the need for traditional subjects. The issue that all children are different. So these were some of the issues, and if you look at these issues against that long list of things that we thought children should learn, then perhaps we get the beginnings of a new approach. So I would say that if you were to look at these 6 critical issues that came out, and then look at the list of things that we think children should do and the list of ways in which they should be assessed, then we can perhaps get to our second big question. So here is the second big question of this course. How should children acquire this knowledge and these skills? So we have a list of knowledge and skills, we have some assessment ideas, we have some issues. If you combine all of this together, could you come up with the answer to the question, so how should children acquire these skills and this knowledge? So in order to help answer provocation 2, I think it will be useful to briefly look back at your own education. I did so for myself. And I have a few questions that you could ask yourself about your own school education. Now, I am not going to give you the answers to what I thought about for my own school education, because that might put an unconscious bias into your mind, or maybe not, but I thought that it's best that I don't actually discuss my own schooling, but raise the questions that I had thought about in respect to my schooling. Now here's what you could think about. You could describe to yourself your personal education and your schooling. What was it like? Where was it? What times? Throw your mind back to if possible to primary, because when you try to think about this, you'll notice that your first thoughts are usually at around year 9, year 10. We seem to remember those years very clearly, or much more clearly than we would, for example, year 4 or year 3. But I think a lot of the key to what we eventually become lies inside those early years. So if possible, throw your mind back to then. It actually is quite illustrative that if you do try to throw your mind back to when you were 10 years old, you'll notice that your brain has retained certain images and certain events and forgotten others. And in that itself lies, I think, pretty much of a secret to who you are. Another question to think about is, where did you learn what you learned? Was it everything inside the classroom? Do you actually remember? Do you remember what you did in your classroom when you were, let's say, 13 years old or 12 years old? I think you'll again find that when you try to answer that question, you get a spotty image. You remember some things and you don't remember others. I'm very fascinated by why is it that our brains reject some of the stuff and retain something else. I guess those amongst you who have a background in psychology might be able to answer that question. Did you learn from books? Did you learn from parents? Did you learn from peers? What were the sources? Did you have a favorite teacher? Or do you have to, that's not really an easy question to answer. Some people will immediately pop up with a name, but others need to think before they answer that question. That in itself is quite intriguing. Why do we have to, when asked the question, did you have a favorite teacher? Why is it that we need to think? You could ask yourself, why do you think the education you received is no longer adequate, if you think it's no longer adequate? Think of all the things they taught you in school, both primary and secondary, and of things in it that you have never used, or things in it that you have used but you will not use anymore. And that's a very interesting list to make for yourself. What has changed? Why is it that certain things which we could do earlier and did do earlier disappear? Why is it that there were certain things that we were taught to do which we never ever did actually? What are those things? So when you go through these 4 questions, and I'll just repeat them very quickly: your own personal schooling, where did you learn things from, your sources of learning, who was your favorite teacher if you had one, and why do you think the education you received is no longer adequate? What has changed? Also add to that, or at least I would add to that, some of the results that we got from some of the experiments that I did. If you take an experiment like the hole in the wall, what does it tell us about personal schooling? What does it tell us about sources of knowledge? What does it say about a favorite teacher in a teacher-less environment? Going on to self-organized learning environments, how do those 4 questions about schooling apply to souls? What's your personal experience? What are the sources? What role does the teacher play? And is the education that a soul provides, is the learning that a soul provides, is that adequate? Is it more adequate than what you would get in traditional schooling? These are some of the questions that I think we need to think about before going on to the next step. Well, if you've reflected on the answers that we discussed to question number 1, about what should a 12-year-old know, and then if you have done the bit of thinking about your own schooling and in what ways it was adequate, in what ways it was not, then it's time to start thinking about how the list of things that we thought children should learn should actually be taught to them. How should they learn it? Should they be taught at all? I think there are three key questions here that is worth thinking about. Do you think the role of the teacher is changing? If it is, what is it changing from and what is it changing to? If you think about that, I think you will run into a pretty murky kind of area. It's not as though everything that a teacher does is going to change. There are many things that will remain, but many will also change quite dramatically. You could think about what the role of the teacher will be in the future in helping children learn. Is it one of guidance? Is it a mentor of some kind? Some children in my Indian experiments describe their cloud grannies, and when we asked them, so what was good about it? What do you like about the granny? One of them, a girl in Delhi, said, what I like about my granny is that she is not a guide or a mentor or a teacher. She is just a friend. Is that the role then that the future teacher will need to take? The role of a friend. And how is that different from the role of a guide? You could also think about the potential of technology, the role and the potential of technology. Of course, that figures very prominently in almost any discussion on education today, and it definitely should. But what exactly is that role? What is technology going to do to education? And I think when you think about it, about this issue of technology and education, you could run into extremes. At one extreme, you could say technology is only a side issue in learning. Teaching and learning is the main thing. Technology can be an enabler, or it could be used, it could not be used, or whatever. At the other extreme end, you could say technology will overtake all of existing teaching and learning. In fact, one of the really provocative things I heard from Nicholas Negroponte quite recently was the idea, well, not in so many words, but an idea of a pill that will alter your brain structures so that you would know something. You know, it used to be kind of funny. It was almost like a joke that, you know, you take a pill and you know French or German or whatever. But it's not that funny anymore, because it is actually possible to think of how that might happen. If you knew the neurological state of the entire brain, well, easier said than done with, you know, 1 trillion neurons, but if you did have a map, and if you had a map before you knew German, and if you had the map after you knew German, then in principle you could change map 1 into map 2 using a mechanical means or a chemical means, and the learning should have just happened. Well, here are the two extremes to what technology might be. A little screen on the side, which you may or may not use, to a pill that finishes your schooling in a few hours. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to reading what your responses are at #EDU8213.